It was late summer of 2011. I was almost 19 and was hanging out with my best friend, who was a few years younger than me. We live in a very rural area of southwestern Virginia, about 15 minutes from Mount Airy, North Carolina. Around here, pretty much everything closes by 10 p.m., so you have to find your own ways to pass the time. But that was never a problem for us, as we could always find a way to have fun. The night started out harmless enough, first to the mall, then cruising the streets looking for girls, things any teen guys would be up to. When that proved to be unsuccessful, we just decided to go bowling until they closed. We then went to Main Street a little before midnight just to walk some of the back alleys, acting like the edgy badasses we thought we were. But we never felt like we were in any danger, as there isn't much violent crime in the area. After we'd walked all the streets, we got bored with this and decided to grab a bite from Waffle House, as this was pretty much the only late-night dining option at the time. After we ate and made a quick stop at Walmart, we still weren't ready to go home, so we set out driving around some of the backcountry roads. This was nothing new to us. As I said, around here, you have to make your own fun, and late-night drives were always our thing. The stretch of road we were now on, I had only driven maybe once before during the day, though it wasn't far from where either of us lived. We just had no reason of going down it. While still in Carolina, the road is paved, but within a mile it enters back into Virginia and turns into dirt. Like most of the dirt roads around here, the county doesn't really give this one much attention since it's so far out of the way and there are very few houses on it. Since the road often washes out in the heavy rains, you have to drive much slower, and being as unfamiliar with it as we were now traveling at a crawl. While we were both more cautious now, it still just seemed as any other road we would drive now at this time of night. The roads are essentially empty around here, and with only a handful of houses on this road, we were certain we wouldn't run into any other traffic. The road is mainly all wooded and sits at the bottom of a small mountain. At night, it's easy to overlook any of the houses on it. We probably would have missed them all if not for, out of the corner of our eye, we noticed a light burning. We both noticed a man standing under his porch light. We couldn't make out any features of the man, but we could tell he was watching us, standing completely motionless with the exception of his head following us. While we were both now on edge, we tried not to think much of it. We figured it was just someone stepping out for a cigarette. It's just his demeanor that was so discomforting to us. While nothing came from that man watching us, this was only the beginning. We gradually picked up our speed as we were becoming a little more unnerved the more we talked about it. Within just a few minutes, though, we came to the end of the road, and we were back on the hardtop road that I was much more familiar with and that I drove about once a week. He turned right, and we were feeling much better as we could pick up our speed and leave the thoughts of that man behind us. We enjoyed the sights from this road as it travels atop a small mountain ridge offering beautiful views of the town below. After a couple of miles, we had reached the end of this road and made another right to make our way back to my house. This road is a little more wooded than the one we had just turned from, but I was even more familiar with this road as I drove or ridden it literally thousands of times before. As we're making our way back toward the main highway, we saw something up ahead in the distant reaches of my headlights. Deer are horrendous around here, so we figured that's all it was and slowed down. We began to notice it was much wider than the brown fur of a deer, but we're both used to seeing the occasional albino, so still assumed that's all it was. As we got closer, we noticed it was no animal at all. It was definitely a human, but hunched over with their back to us. They were walking in the left lane, against traffic as one is supposed to. I looked back at my friend as he asked, "What the hell are they doing walking at this time of night?" I looked back towards the person and could finally make out the shape of an older-looking woman with long, scraggly gray hair, wearing a white t-shirt and white pants. She still had her back turned to us until we were about 50 feet away from her. That's when she turned to us. We got the first look at her face. I don't want to say she was on meth or other drugs, but that's the look she gave off. Deep eye sockets with heavy, dark bags under them, greasy hair, and very aged skin. Not sure how old she actually was, but if I had to guess, I'd say mid-40s to late 50s. But that wasn't the worst of it. She put her hands in the air and started waving them frantically and running towards us. When she did, we could see what looked like dried blood all over the front of her shirt and pants, as well as what looked like a big knife in one of her hands. We weren't sure what she wanted, but that desire to be edgy badasses was instantly erased. We floored it and didn't let off until we reached the highway. We were so terrified of the entire ordeal that what would have usually been a 5-minute quick drive to my house became a 35-minute detour just on the absurd thought that she could somehow follow us there. In small communities like this, you know pretty much everyone, but neither of us had ever seen this woman before, nor did we ever again. We kept a watch on local news for any stories about a bloody woman being picked up, but never heard a thing. I can't even begin to come up with an explanation why she would be walking the backcountry roads at almost 4 in the morning in her shaping condition with blood on her clothes and a knife in her hand with all the risks of human or animal altercation she faced. Fast forward to present day, I now live with my wife on that peaceful road on the mountain ridge between the two roads of the incidents and take the latter one on an almost daily basis and still have seen no sign of that strange woman since. Just earlier this year, there was a huge drug and cockfighting ring busted down the road of the watching man. I don't know if it was the same house or if these people were even living in the area back then, but after all this happened, I've often wondered if that was the same house. Maybe that guy was keeping guard on the place. As for the woman, I just hope I never run into her again. One time, a few months ago, I was driving my car late at night. I was on a quiet road, driving about 5 miles per hour above the speed limit. The road had just 2 lanes, one for traffic going the way I was and the other for oncoming traffic. I was just trying to get home and listening to the radio. I remember at one point I came up on a smaller pickup truck driving up ahead. When I approached it, I slowed down because the truck was driving much slower than I was. But soon, things got kind of ridiculous. The speed limit on this road was 50 miles per hour, and we were going almost 30 miles per hour. I remained behind the truck, going very slowly, for 2 or 3 minutes. Then, I decided that I would pass the truck. Maybe something was wrong with it, and it couldn't go very fast. I wasn't in a big hurry or anything, but going that much slower than the speed limit, I lost patience. I pulled out into the oncoming lane of traffic. Luckily, these roads were really quiet, and nobody was coming in the other direction at all. I started to pass the truck easily, but before I could clear it, the truck started speeding up. I was going about 55, and soon the truck was going at least 55 as well. This made me really angry. I sped up even more, and was finally able to clear the truck now that I was in front of him. But unfortunately, the truck was now right on my tail. His headlights were so close I wondered if his truck would bump into my car. It looked like a man was driving, but I couldn't really see all that well. Luckily, the truck didn't bump mine. Still, as I was going now 60 miles per hour, which was 10 over the limit, he was still right behind me. We both drove like this for maybe about a minute. When I saw that he hadn't let up at all, I decided that it would be best to just let him pass. I had to drive on this road for maybe another 5 miles or so, and there weren't any other roads to turn onto in the immediate area. So I decided to just pull over. I put on my hazard lights and moved over to the side of the road. As soon as I did, the truck behind me did as well. Now I was really mad. Was this guy angry with me for trying to pass him, and now he was following me? He had been going so slow, anybody would have done the same thing I did. I kept slowing down, and my car came to a stop. The truck did as well. We both sat there in our vehicles for a few seconds. I was angry, and I guess I was feeling like a tough guy. I decided I was going to get out and talk to the driver of the truck and ask him what his problem was. I opened up my door and started walking towards the truck. When I did, I held out my hands as if to say, "What's your problem?" I remember that as I was doing that and I was barely in the street, I saw the truck suddenly start to move. It was then that I realized this guy was going to try to run me over. The truck was driving straight for me. I ran back, but was only able to take about 3 steps. I then jumped and actually landed on the hood of my own car. The truck barely missed me and luckily didn't hit my car either. After he had missed, I saw him slamming on the brakes up ahead. I quickly quickly jumped into my vehicle and started driving away. The guy in his truck then started following me again as soon as he got the chance. He was once again right on my tail, but driving more reckless than before. I was driving on the street, but then went to the far side of the road. The man swerved after me but went too far, and his truck ended up going off the road and into the ditch, the sort of big ditch. The truck didn't flip or anything, but it was enough to get him stuck. I kept driving and then called the police when I was a good distance away. They ended up locating the man, and he got a ticket for reckless driving. But I was unable to prove that he tried to run me over. I just hope I never see him again. I was driving from Brooklyn to Vermont to my friend John's cabin for a weekend of snowboarding. I had two cars at the time of this story, a 2013 BMW 3 Series and a 2006 Ford F-150, which I was driving on this particular night. I had my snowboarding gear in the bed of the truck. I was about 45 minutes from my buddy's cabin at this point. It was late, like 10 p.m. It was pitch black on these roads, and it was snowing. There were like no other cars on the road up there besides me at that hour. I had just gotten my truck back from the mechanic a few weeks ago. I frequently had problems with that truck, and that night was no exception. At perhaps the worst possible time, on the quietest, darkest road, suddenly my engine starts to completely overheat, into the red zone. I slow down and pull onto the side and wait for it to cool down. Then I slowly got back on the road, but even at a slow speed, the needle went back up to the red, and the engine was overheating again. I had to pull over and turn off the truck. I went under the hood to try and diagnose the problem, but I couldn't in the dark in the snow. I had to call John. On this road, the reception for T-Mobile was non-existent. I couldn't even call for help. In the moment, I felt screwed. I went into the truck to turn it on again and at least wait in the heat of the truck as it idled. It didn't seem to overheat while idling. I tried one more time to drive, but the same thing happened again, so I had to wait like 10 minutes before I saw a car passing. I had my hazards on, and I opened the door and waved my arms. The passing car stopped. It was some little Toyota. The guy rolled his window down, and I thanked him for stopping and asked if I could use his phone. He handed it to me. He must have been a local because he had bars. I called my friend John. He picked up, and I asked him what I should do. He told me to call this specific towing company nearby and that he'd come and pick me up. I gave him my exact location, and he said he was going to head over. After that, I called the towing company he gave me and requested assistance. During both phone calls, the guy in his car watched me the whole time. After my phone calls, I handed the man back his phone and thanked him. He said, "You're welcome," and without saying anything else, he rolled up his window and drove down the snowy road into the darkness ahead. I watched as his taillights disappeared completely as he descended below the top of the hilly road above. I was once again alone. I got back into my idling truck to be in the warmth. I flicked the headlights off for a second just to get an idea of how dark it was out. When I say I couldn't see an inch outside the windows, I'm not exaggerating. It was pure blackness. I sat in the truck waiting and waiting. I couldn't even do anything that needed an internet connection. I resorted to playing games on my phone for 20 minutes until there was a bang at my passenger side window. I jumped out of my skin as I looked to the window. I couldn't see much of the person. It was too dark outside, and the headlights didn't really light up the sides of the truck. I heard a man's voice start begging for help. He was yelling at me to open the door. He was freezing. I heard him trying to open the door himself, but it was locked. I shined my flashlight to the window, but it barely helped in seeing who was out there. All I saw was someone in a really big black coat with the hood over his head. I yelled back, "What's wrong?" And the mysterious man outside replied, saying he's lost and stranded and needs to get out of the cold. I didn't trust this. I sat there nervously, trying to figure out what to ask him to prove he's not someone looking to harm me. I didn't even figure out what to say before he started aggressively trying to still open the locked door, and then started pounding on the glass even harder, still screaming for help. In the heat of the moment, I decided to listen to my gut. I put the truck in drive, and he realized this and started pounding harder on the window to break it. I drove the truck onto the road and brought it up to 30 miles per hour, despite the damage I was surely doing to the overheating engine. But then I saw something that I didn't expect, that made me feel like my heart skipped a beat. After probably 10 minutes of this, I found a spot that looked good for hiding. I wasn't really hearing the noises behind me anymore, so I decided I would hide there. I took a large stick and tossed it deeper into the direction that I had been running in the thick woods. Then I quietly hid myself behind a large log that was sort of broken. It had probably been sheltered to an animal, but it was a good place for me to hide. Now, I heard a few noises in the woods a long ways back. It was pretty quiet. So more time went by, and things became very quiet. I kept waiting there for probably 30 minutes. Then, I finally felt safe enough to leave my hiding spot. I walked back through the woods, trying to go in the same direction that I had come from. After about another half hour of walking, I finally made it back to the road. I was tired from all the running and walking through the woods. Luckily, I didn't see the other car on the road when I got back. I was a little ways down from my car, and I walked back to it. As I was approaching my car, I saw headlights coming again. At first, I was about to run back into the woods, thinking that it might be the same guy. But I realized that these headlights were much bigger and those of a truck instead of a car. I decided to stay by my car. The truck actually slowed down and came to a stop behind me. A man got out, who turned out to be a really nice guy who lived in the area. I told him about running out of gas, and he happened to have a small 2-gallon gas can in the back of his truck that he carried around. He let me put it into my car for free. Then he gave me directions to the nearest gas station. After he left, I was able to make it to the gas station, which was only like 2 miles away. It was a long night, but I finally made it home,